Offer valid on standard browsers. U.S. only.
When I heard about Date My Age, I thought, really? But there I was in my empty, quiet house, my laptop on the kitchen counter, and I typed in my name. Looking for a man between the ages of 40 to 60? Sure, why not?
Date My Age is different. With verified profiles, you can feel safe and secure to explore meaningful connections with interesting and mature singles.
Date My Age made it really easy. I could join and view online profiles for free. All of a sudden, my empty house wasn't so quiet anymore. I got so much attention, it just made me feel seen and alive. Date My Age helped me start a totally new chapter in my life.
Find a friend, a lover, a partner at Date My Age. Get 60% off when you join at datemyage.com today. That's datemyage.com to connect with thousands of singles worldwide. datemyage.com.
Blog Talk Radio.
The following broadcast is brought to you by the iGolf Sports Network.
Golf Talk Live is sponsored by the iGolf Sports Network and Golf Tips Magazine. Here's Andrew to tell you more about our sponsors.
iGolf Sports is a live stream broadcast and media production company providing quality programming designed to attract the golfing enthusiast. And Golf Tips, the game's most in-depth instruction magazine, including reviews on the latest equipment, tips from top teaching professionals, all designed to help you improve from tee to green. Welcome to Golf Talk Live with your host, Ted Odorico. Join Ted each week as he speaks with some of the best in golf. This week's special guest will join us a bit later. But first up is another great discussion on Coach's Corner. So let's introduce tonight's Coach's Corner panel.
All right, good evening, everybody, and once again, welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and as always, we've got a great show for you this evening. We're going to be starting off here in just a moment with another great discussion on Coach's Corner, and I've got two great professionals joining me tonight on the panel for that discussion, and I'm looking forward to speaking with both of them. And a little bit later on, I'm going to be joined by this evening's special guest, Taba Dale. She is the owner of Taba Inc. She's also a board member of the Golf Heritage Society, and also the author of Terroir of Golf, a golf book for wine lovers. And we're going to talk about that and more when she joins me on the second half of the program. But first up, as I mentioned, it's Coach's Corner time, so let me introduce tonight's guest panelists. First up, of course, is Pete Buchanan. He's been teaching this great game now for over 30-plus years. He's also the founder and director of instruction of Plain Simple Golf, LLC, which, of course, houses the Plain Simple Golf Circuit and the Simple Swing Repeater Training Brace, and he's been helping golfers of all levels focus on building a repeatable swing. Also joining the panel tonight is another favorite, Sue Weger. She is a #1 best-selling international author, motivational speaker, and peak performance coach, and she's been teaching this great game as an LPGA Class A professional for over 24 years and is the owner of Weger Consulting, LLC, and her book, Golf, The Last 6 Inches, Change Your Brain, is available at Amazon.com. So, Pete and Sue, welcome back to Coach's Corner panel.
Thanks, Ted. Good to be here.
For the conversation.
All right, I appreciate it. And as I was mentioning to you guys off air, this is we got about another month to give or take about a month and a half for the season. We'll be wrapping up on Golf Talk Live here. I think the last date, if I'm not mistaken, is December 14th, and then we'll be taking a break. And then we'll be returning back. The show will return back early February. Coach's Corner, of course, doesn't start back up until March, but the Golf Talk Live Light, as I like to call it, will be starting back up in early February. So I'll give you the dates here in the next couple of weeks exactly when we'll be coming back and when our last show is going to be. So I hope you'll stick around and join us for that. As I mentioned, we're going to be having a great discussion tonight. And I'm going to start with you, Pete. I'll do it in the order that I introduced you. And this is something that's, it's sort of a multitude of questions here and that, but sort of covering a broad range of things. But, we see this more, I think, in the professional level. We've seen it with players like Nick Faldo. Tiger has certainly done it, and a few others. And that is sort of seeking that perfection. Those are two that readily come to mind. And there's certain inherent dangers of sort of seeking perfection, especially in the golf swing. You know, Nick Baldo really struggled with his game very early on. Then he hooked up with David Ledbetter and seemed to turn things around and went on ultimately to win 6 majors, including 2 Masters. But he was always sort of in pursuit of perfection. And it's good to always want to improve and get better, but there's also inherent dangers, as I mentioned, to try to perfect that golf swing. Maybe you could talk about some of that a little bit and give me your thoughts on some of the dangers of trying to be too perfect.
Well, that is a great question. I think you can always strive for perfection, understanding that it's going to give you, the ability to, give you more peak performance. Hitting shot after shot the same all the time is difficult to do, although there is a way you can do it. But under the circumstances, under the pressures, it's hard to repeat, and it's also hard to score. But I think you can strive for perfection if you understand where that strive and that drive is taking you. And if you get caught up in, it has to be perfect or I'm not going to get there, then I think it can be a huge detriment. It can actually work as a negative because, you just can't seem to get there. I think you can use it as a stepping stone to help you, improve your performance, striving to get it, correct or whatever you feel correct is. But yeah, there's always that danger that you can, work too hard for trying to get something and then you lose sight of other areas and then it takes you in the wrong direction. So, I think it can work both ways, but yeah, I think, ultimately you have to be careful. You have to understand, just what that drive for perfection is and how it can best suit you and your ability to get yourself better.
Well said. And Sue, I'm going to give you sort of the same question, but I'm going to tweak it just slightly. There's another way to look at this as well, and not so much about trying to, perfect your golf swing, but a lot of times we've seen, and the 2 players I mentioned are 2 that actually dramatically changed throughout their careers, their golf swing. They started, it might, for the average, golfer out there, it might not look that much different, but to the trained eye, there was some definitely notable things that they had done different. And I guess that's one of the things that I'm wanting to talk a little bit about is it's okay to want to improve and obviously and get better at your ball striking, be more consistent. And there's nothing wrong with sort of seeking that perfection. But I think the other problem that can arise is trying to change things too much dramatically. So, you get to one level and you're doing well, and then all of a sudden you're pivoting and you're doing something entirely different because you're trying to get that, what you think is that perfection in your golf swing. Can you touch on that aspect a little bit, that, sometimes there can be a danger in mixing and sort of revamping or reinventing the wheel too many times in your career, because that can obviously cause setbacks. Give me your thoughts here.
Yeah, I think it's that's why I wrote the book in regards to golf last 6 inches, because I think the problem with a lot of golfers is they're what I call very analytical thinkers. And what happens with that is when they're over the golf ball, they're thinking way too much about their golf swing. And, like with Vision 54, what they always talk about is like they have a play box and they have a think box. And when you're over the ball, you should be in a play box, which means you should be in your right side of your brain, not your left side of your brain, in that kind of, in that way. So when people stand over the ball and they're thinking about, okay, I need to have, grip, aim, stance, posture, yada, yada, that's what interferes with their performance, if you may. And I think that's why they're striving for perfection, because they're thinking, okay, I have to have, here's my bullet points of my golf swing. I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this, and I need to do that. And I think that's where people get in trouble, because when they're standing over the golf ball, they're thinking way too much about what they're supposed to do versus thinking about, okay, where do I want to go? Where do I want to take the ball to in regards to the target? And I think that's where people struggle, and that's why I teach my players, okay, here's the think box and here's the play box. Once you step over the ball, that you're over in standing up and over the ball, you're in your right brain. You're not in your analytical brain. You want to have a free-flowing swing. You don't want to be thinking about what you're doing. And I think that's one of the problems with a lot of people when they're trying to make improvements. They're thinking too much, and I think that's where people struggle. And that's what I teach my players.
And great answer as well. And you're exactly right. I think, in that sort of seeking perfection in our golf game, especially our golf swing, there comes a point in time you have to be sort of happy where you are. And, there's always going to be some players that, as you pointed out, Sue, very analytical, that want to dissect the swing, to its core. And that can sometimes work to your advantage, but a lot of times it actually works to your detriment, because then you overthink the process, and then you're always going to find something to pick apart. So you're exactly right. You just need to, there's a time to prepare and a time to get ready, and then there's a time to actually play, and you've got to know when to flick the switch and get out of that analytical box, if you will. So great answers, guys. If you hit it right on the head. Pete, I'm going to come back to you on this one. This is going to seem like a very simplistic question, but I think sometimes in any really teaching capacity, we want to sort of teach what we know, when really what we need to do is listen more to our students. It's not just a courteous thing to do, but it's important. Give us a reason why that's important. Why do we need to listen to our students? We know the golf swing. We know what has to happen. Why don't we just sort of stand up there in our soapbox and say, hey, here's what you need to do this, do that, and have at it? Why do we need to listen to students? Pete, I'm not sure if your mic's off or...
No, it's my fault. Sorry about that. I was muted.
No, that's...
I think, to me, when you've got to listen to them so you get a better understanding of where they're coming from and how they learn, and also what their concerns are and what they feel they need to work on. And then you can sort of move that around into, putting it into how you're going to teach them to get there. But I think, I always use the deal my dad always taught me, where they ask a question and you answer their question with a question. And you keep asking them questions until you get, dialed down enough to get the answers that you want. But I think, for me, too, I like to start off a lesson just finding out how their day went. I think I told you the story once. We had a guy in there for a lesson, and he just had a horrible day. And I think he hit 2 balls, and I said, grab your club, just go have a beer. And we sat there. He had more fun talking for the hour than hitting golf balls, just to get him away. He had such a rotten day, he wasn't going to hit good golf balls anyway. So sometimes listening to him can take you into a totally different aspect. But no, I think it's, we as instructors, we need to listen to what they're telling us, because it can enhance what we're trying to do. And it just, I think it gets your foot more in the door, because then they're like, hey, he really is concerned with what I'm trying to do, instead of just giving me, what he knows. Obviously, we know more than they do, in the most part, especially when it's concerned with golf. But, they know a lot more relative to what they do, relative to what we're talking about. So if you can match the two together by just asking them questions and listening to what they're telling you, it's just going to enhance the overall process.
Exactly. I think that's a great point. And Sue, what is it that you're trying to hear when you're listening? I mean, you're obviously, as Pete pointed out, you're trying to get a better understanding of where they're at in the thought process of their game. What is it that's concerning them? Is it not just necessarily the short game or hitting their driver, but sometimes there's other things that come out. So are there specific things that you generally listen more? I mean, obviously you're listening in general overall, but are there specific things that you're looking to try to uncover when you're having discussions with your students?
Yeah, what I always ask them is, do you think you're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic? And the difference between those three is, if you're visual, are you, what do you see? If you're auditory, what are you hearing? And kinesthetically, what are you feeling? So those 3 things I always ask in regards to, and sometimes I even, just walk up to them and just say, what do you think you're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic? And then I just kind of explain to them, how do you learn? What's the best way you learn? And that's why because I want to know, because I want to speak their language in regards to how they learn. So if they're visual, then I talk about, seeing a picture or visualizing an image, or but if they're auditory, they're going to hear things from me, or if they're kinesthetic, they're going to feel things when they're over the golf ball. And I think it's important that each person knows who they are and how they learn, because then I can communicate to them approximately, if they're kinesthetic, then I'm going to basically show them some things, or if they're visual, I'm going to show them, or if they're auditory, we'll talk through it. But I think that's why it's really important to understand who your student is and where they're coming from and what type of learner they are, because in that way, you as an instructor, you step into that mode of instruction, and that way the student picks up more information from you than if you were, if let's say if they were kinesthetic and you're talking and you just kind of show them things, they're not going to pick up as much, versus if they can feel it, they'll pick up more of it.
Couldn't agree more. I think back to, when I was in school, the teachers that I learned the most from, because I'm a visual person. Math was always a strong subject, but, I needed to see the teacher working out the problems on the board. If they just sort of went up there and it was like, blah, 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 I had a tougher time grasping some of the concepts than if they went up there and actually demonstrated and worked out the problems. Then I could pick up and understand, okay, I've got to do this or I've got to do that. So that's important. I think also, too, an important question that has to be asked, and I this is something that Cindy Miller talks about a lot on the other program, Women of Golf, on Tuesdays, and that is the why. She will ask students right up front, especially new students, why? Why do you want to play golf? What's your reasoning behind it? Is, are you looking to be competitive? Or are you just out having fun? Because I think once you understand the why they're there in the first place, then that helps, again, isolate into other areas how you're going to approach it. Because if somebody's just out to have a good time, maybe they're going to just play a few times a year, they're not really, overly serious, then you don't have to dial down as deep and you don't have to draw as much information out of them. But if they want to be competitive, then you have to get into that a little bit more. And once you understand that why they're there in the first place, it makes it a little bit easier to just to isolate some of the steps that need to be taken. But again, both great answers. Pete, I'm stepping back to you, so make sure you unmute your mic.
You got it.
This is, listen, I've done it too. I've rambled on here some nights and forgot to take my mute off. So, but anyways, this is one here. And again, I'm going to give you a couple examples of players that we've seen over the years. But, getting students to accept the quirks in their swings. Lee Trevino, Jim Furyk come to mind. I think sometimes in the past, there has been sort of a movement to take those sort of quirkiness out of a golfer's swing. And sometimes that's not necessary. So how do you get them to accept it? Everybody wants to have this picture-perfect swing, but sometimes people just, Lee Trevino and Jim Furyk, both very, great players in their own right. Obviously, Lee's played much longer than Jim. But sometimes it's okay to have a quirkiness about the swing. They can loop it around like Jim Furyk, or they can, be very open to, to their target line like Lee was for his career. How do you get them to accept that, and how do you figure out how to sort of work it in the process to still make them an accomplished player without having to sort of dismantle maybe that quirkiness? Your thoughts?
I think in looking at their overall motion, you just kind of explain to them that even though there might be a quirkiness to what they're doing, relative to impact, you can have it so it doesn't have that big of a result to it. I mean, we're trying to get the golf club in a certain position at contact, and so even though they may have a peculiar motion that they make, I can tell you one of them I have in particular. The club goes straight up in the air in the backswing at the start, and I at the start tried to get it in a different place, and I tell you what, it goes straight up in the air, but it ends up in the right spot at the top. So I just left it alone. It looks crazy, but it ends up in the right place. And so it's easier for him to make a downswing from there than if I actually put it in the spot where I think it should be. So, you can work the quirks in showing them how through the motion that, it may be there, but relative to that movement, it actually can assist them in getting the right impact. And I think in the end, like anything else, if they hit, straight solid shots, then that quirkiness and their emphasis on it changes in a hurry. They get used to it. But I think you can show them that even though it has that in there, it's not a detriment. But then you can also too put them in a place and say, well, if you want to swing it more conventional, let's see what happens. And then sometimes the impact when they do that isn't very good at all. So then you can show them, say, look, even though this is in here, it's not going to keep you from getting the results that we're trying to get.
Yep. Again, well said. And Sue, I think, when you look at a couple of other players that come to mind, Freddie Couples and even John Daly, it's not so much they had necessarily a quirkiness about their swing, but both of them took the club back in a what we would classify as a non-conventional way, but it worked for them. Obviously, Freddie had some back issues, throughout his career that he's managed to, have addressed and seems to be in a much better place now, but it did give him a lot of problems. So there's obviously, is there a point maybe if it's early in the student's learning curve, if you will, that maybe to avoid situations down the road that could potentially, be detrimental to their back or what have you, maybe make adjustments. And again, I'm going to remove the word quirks in your case because it's not really necessarily a quirk. It's just somebody, maybe wants to emulate. They see Freddie or a John Daly and they want to emulate that. It may not be right for them. So how do you find the right balance and say, okay, or when is the appropriate time to make changes? Pete pointed out when's the time to sort of, if it's working, don't mess it up.
Yeah, I think you have to look at a couple things. Number one, some people might have physical limitations in their body that are creating that type of swing, for example. And that's what I ask them. I said, that's one of the questions I ask all my students. I said, do you have any physical limitations that's causing you to, create the swing that you're creating? And I think that's really important because sometimes when, an individual walks up to your lesson tee, you don't know if they're having any physical limitations or not. And that's why I always ask them. So I think that's one of the first questions I always ask people is like, do you have any physical limitations? Because with their physical limitations, it might drive the reason why they're swinging the way they're swinging. And I think that's why you just have to be careful with certain people, especially older people as they come to the lesson tee, with the flexibility and their mobility. Because in regards to, what they're trying to do versus what they're actually doing may not be the same. So I think that's one of the reasons I always ask, about physical limitations and finding out, I'll videotape their swing and we'll look at it and see what they're doing. But that's why I always ask about physical limitations, because I think that when people have physical limitations in regards to, like Freddie, he has a bad back, so that's why he swings it straight upright. And I think that's the reason why a lot of people might emulate, Freddie, if he's got, somebody's got a bad back or something like that. But I just think it's like that's one of the things is I always ask them, what are you trying to do versus what you're really actually doing.
Yeah, and good establishing early on too as to what their limitations and their abilities are from a physical standpoint. Mental side of the game is a much different beast, but the physical limitations, obviously, it's good to know. And you also want to make sure that if they are, working with, let's say, a bad back or maybe some, long-term wrist injury, it's good to have that because sometimes you can make adjustments or tweaks in order to accommodate that. And always, whenever you're dealing with somebody, that is dealing with that, is you want to make sure that they have consulted with a physician that specializes in that type of injury or that type of condition, so that they're not just, going out and making sure that, that certainly anybody is welcome to come out and play golf, but sometimes there's certain things that they need to be able to do. And if they're struggling to do that, it's great that they want to give it the old college try. But if the doctor said, hey, this is something you can't do, then that's good to have up front as well. So I agree. I think you really have to understand that. And you have to make sure, again, it goes back to what we talked about, really listening to the students and those important questions to get the information up front. Pete, great answer, by the way, Sue. Pete, I'm coming back to you, and this is one that I don't think we see too much in the amateur side, but it can happen. Avoiding burnout in both practice and play. This is something, too, that sometimes you can, it's great to get out. We want them to go out and practice. A lot of times we're having to push them to get practice more. But then on the other side of the coin, there's people that just practice, and they get to a point where they're not really practicing with a purpose. As I mentioned off air earlier, and may have mentioned on the show a few weeks back, that we had a golf school. Golf Tips magazine had a golf school up at Macklemore this past weekend. And one of the students that we were working with, we talked about, practicing with purpose and with intent. And I think if you're doing that, then you're going to avoid that burnout a little bit. But give me your thoughts on that as well. How do we avoid burnout? How do we make sure that they're practicing with intent and purpose, and also that, we want them to play and get out and enjoy that, but again, there may be limitations with that as well. What are your thoughts here?
Well, it's another great topic. What I've tried to do with my folks is I create practice. I call it practice performance, but I create practices for them, and that way I can put together a plan that allows them to practice enough to get done the things they need to get done, but not practice too much, so that, as you said, they're just hitting balls without any purpose. So every practice session has a distinct target and purpose that they're trying to achieve, and then they move on to the next one. That way we can sort of look at how they're practicing and what they're practicing, and then they can also start to, in those practice sessions, figure out, where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are. But I also like to combine it with playing. I don't want them to just practice all the time. I want them to play. So part of that practice schedule is playing on the golf course. So it's a piece of it. So even though sometimes I'll tell them, I want you to play 9 holes, but I want you to do these things in these 9 holes. And so they're actually practicing while they're playing, so they can get the best of both. And that way it gets them a little bit more secure that, hey, practicing and playing, they're interrelated. And so you don't think that, well, I can do it on the range, but I can't do it on the course. So I want them to be able to understand that, they work hand in hand and they can help themselves out. And I understand that it goes into, how your thought processes are and all that. But I think the more comfortable you can get in a practice routine, it helps you when you actually go to play. So, I think if you design out exactly what you're trying to do each time you go to practice, it'll keep you from burning out and just hitting too many golf balls.
Well said, Pete. And Sue, another area too is course attitude. Can certainly affect course results. True or false?
Very true. Very true. And I think
so. Let's unpack. Unpack
Yeah.
that a little bit. I knew that was going to be the answer, but unpack that. Obviously, a player's attitude that's, again, falls in line with your
How
book.
much time we have? No,
so
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I know. We got enough time. We got about 30 minutes, but unpack that a little bit if you wouldn't mind, because that sort of falls in, again, with a little bit of what you talk about in your book. So, course attitude, is it affecting us out there? And if so, how's it doing it?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I always talk about with my students when we do playing lessons. I'm like, the first question I ask, I said, okay, what's your objection today? Or what's the purpose of the play today? And I think that's one of the questions that a lot of people just kind of ignore, and they're thinking, okay, I just want to go play really, really, really well, and have fun. And I think that's one of the questions I ask them. I said, so are you here to have fun, or are you here to play well? One of those two questions. And I think it kind of depends on the player, because, some people want to just go have some fun, and the other players want to, some more of the serious players want to play well. And so when I talk to them about my book, I just say, okay, well, number one is, like you said, why are you playing today? Are you, what's the purpose of your golf game? Do you want to do it for fun, or do you want to do it for, like, for example, if you want to make a golf team? And then I'll go through, different, not want to say attitudes, but different objections with them, asking them questions about, why do you really want to play? What's your objection today? What's the purpose of the play today? Are you trying to score low? Are you trying to have fun? What's the real purpose behind the game today? And I think that's one of the questions that I always ask people when we do playing lessons, because I want to know where they're coming from so that I can help them achieve what they want on the golf course. And I think that's one of the reasons why, people struggle, because I think sometimes their purpose isn't in the wrong box, if you may.
Well said. I think Pete, just to add a little bit about that, is your attitude can really. Everybody. I don't care who you are. Your attitude can change on the course real quick. It can even sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. Right off the first tee, you hit a great shot. You're in a good frame of mind. Your attitude's upbeat, and you're excited about the round. On the other hand, if you snap hook it or a big old slice into the woods off the first tee, suddenly your attitude that you brought from the range suddenly goes south. So I think you have to. What are some ways that you try to encourage, your students to, even in the darkest moments of that round, to have that sort of positive attitude, if you will, when they're playing?
Well, I try to get them to understand that, there are going to be times when they don't hit shots that they like. It's part of playing golf, and so you have to take the good with the bad per se, but also just to let them know that one shot's not going to destroy your round. You can make up for it at any other given point, and so you just have to keep moving yourself down the road per se, and just continue to do the things that that you can do, and don't let those trouble shots get you down. They're tough sometimes. You have a great round going, and then you like you said, you hit one out of bounds, and it's not fun. But it's in the end of the day, it's not going to ruin a whole round. So you just have to understand that there may be some shots that are in there, but it's real easy for players to remember the one shot they sliced out of bounds, but they forget the 3 20-footers they made. So there's give and take a lot of times in a round, and so you always have to remember that that one shot's not going to be the end all. So try not to let it get you too mad. But on the other side of the coin, I also try to get them to understand. So when you hit those shots, I want you to ask yourself why, and do you know why? And if not, we've got to work on that. So, jot that down on your scorecard, and so you can remember that, I got a question that, why do those shots come up when I'm playing? And so that way we can tackle it at a later time. But, it's always a tough one. I say it all the time. It's no fun to go out and not hit solid shots. I try to get everybody where they can. Obviously, newer players, it's tougher, but, you always want to hit good shots and have the ability to score well, but you just can't dwell on the bad ones.
Yeah, I always say to, golfers is you want to treat when that bad shot happens, you want to treat it like it's something very highly contagious, like a cold, and you want to put it in a little box that can't escape. So when you hit that bad shot, you just sort of put it in that mental box, and it never escapes. It never comes out into your mind. It's gone somewhere, and you file it away, and it's done. And then you're focusing on the task at hand. And that sort of falls in line, Sue, with sort of winning the battle inside, the mental battle. This is something that we see far too often. Nicholas talked about many times over his career that it was how he thought his way around the golf course that made him a champion. It wasn't, because he was the best ball striker, not saying he wasn't good, or, necessarily, the longest. He was certainly one of the longest, but during his time. But it was really the battle that he, sold himself on the inside. So how do we win the battle on the inside? How do we get our mind right? We touched on a few things here on the golf course, but how do you set yourself up mentally for success? What are some steps that you try to get your students to do even before they step out in the golf course?
Yeah, the first thing, after they hit a shot, whether or not it's good or bad, I ask them what was really good about what you just did. And sometimes the players struggle with that question because they're like, I didn't do anything good. And I'm like, no, think about what you really did, in regards to what was good about what you just did. Find the goodness in the shot, and I think that's what a lot of people struggle with. They don't find the goodness in what they're doing. They find what's, the bad part of it, that what they're doing. And then I would ask them, okay, so what was good about it? And I said, what would you change about it? And then the third question is, how would you change it in that sense? And that's what I talk to my players through when we're out there on the playing lessons. That's what I ask them all the time, because too many people focus on what didn't go well, and I like to bring out what was positive about it, and then how would you change it, and then what's the plan of action to change it, so that way you have, like I said, you have a strategy to go into the next shot. And too many people bring in, what I want to say, the last shot into their next shot. And that's one of the problems with a lot of golfers is, they're carrying that, what I want to say, burden of the last shot with them into the next shot. And I teach my players, I said, one shot at a time. We're going to go ahead and go to the next shot, and we're going to think about how we can do better and have a purpose for that shot, and then go forward. And I think that's the reason why a lot of people struggle, is because they carry the baggage with them into the next shot. And I just teach my players, it's like, okay, one shot at a time, one shot at a time, one shot at a time. That's what I do.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. I've always equated this to, and I've said this many, many times on both this show and this show, Women of Golf, but I equate it to somebody at the airport dragging their baggage, their luggage, from one area to the other, and that's exactly what happened. Every bad round, every bad shot, they're standing there on the first tee, and the bags are lined up behind them as they're getting ready to tee off, and it's a variety, and you've got to leave it at home, and that's why jokingly I say that, but truth of the matter is you cannot worry about, even if you're playing the same course that you played last weekend, and maybe you had 4 or 5 really bad holes, or maybe a half a dozen really bad shots. You can't focus on that, and that's what happens. And this brings me to one of our last questions here, and we're going to unpack this as a group. But we've often heard, when we watch the top professionals on TV, on the men's and the ladies tour, and that is entering the zone. There's a lot of things that we can talk about here. One is obviously developing a high self-confidence. They're all when they're in that zone, they're very immersed in the task at hand, as we talked about. Very narrow of attention. They sort of narrow their focus, if you will. And obviously they have very automatic and seemingly effortless executions of those shots. And obviously they're very in control of their emotional side. And then they're enjoying themselves. So with a clear mind, they're out there having fun. So start with you. Maybe we'll handle a few of these, and then Sue, I'll let you pick on as well. So one of the things, obviously, when they're in the zone, a player develops a high self-confidence, and they're very, very focused on that task, which gives them that confidence. Talk about some of those things as well. What happens when we're in the zone? What's happening?
Well, usually you're playing well, which helps. But I think, most of the time when I ask players, quote unquote, what the zone was, I think they feel like, they were just looking at what they were trying to do, looking at the shot and just hitting it, and they were eliminating the thought process of how to hit the shot and just hitting it. And so they were more focused on just playing a shot that they visualized than the technique behind trying to play the shot. And so I think a lot of times you get to a point to where, you're just playing golf and hitting shots and not worried about, number one, what the technique is to hit that shot, and number two, what's the consequence if I don't hit it well. I think those things just go out the window. And as you start hitting it better and better, as you said, the confidence builds. And then, now you're just looking at every shot and saying, all right, well, I'm going to make this putter. I'm going to chip this one in. So I think, overall the confidence level goes up because you are playing better. But I think you start playing better because, your thought process is that, it's getting very, very simple. And you're not really worried about, too much of a technique per se as, just, all right, there's a 10-foot putt. I see it. I got to start it to, a couple inches right, and I'm just going to hit it. Instead of, let's say, I got to take it back here, take it here, take it here. So you start to simplify the thought process, which then, makes scoring a lot easier.
And Sue, what was interesting, one of the reasons why I wanted to throw this one into the discussion is I remember an interview, and I believe it was Bubba Watson after winning the Masters. And the reporter asked him, he said, what were you thinking about out there? And this is Sunday after the round. And he said, really nothing. He said, it's kind of weird. He said, and I'm paraphrasing his discussion, but basically what he was saying is, I really didn't think about anything. I knew I had to go out here and do something. And, he couldn't really break it down. And I think even the reporter was a little bit taken back. So I think what happens is things become very automatic and effortless during that. And that obviously as well, I'm going to get you to sort of talk about that, but also something that's important to allow yourself to get into the zone is being in control of your emotions. So touch on those three areas. So what are we talking about, automatic and effortless? And then, talk a little bit about being on top of or in control of your emotions.
Yeah, I think the first thing is like I talk in my book, it's like you need to be in your right brain. Your right brain is the creative side. So it's just like, I'm just going to go there. I'm just going to put it there, or I'm just going to swing it there, or I'm going to hit it there, that type of thing. The other part about it in regards to controlling your emotions is it kind of depends on the shot. And I think that a lot of the times when the players don't, hit it well, that's when they kind of get upset. And that's why I always tell people, it's like, okay, let's think about what was good about it, now what was bad about it. And that's the process I always go through with all my players, in the sense that, okay, what was good about it? How could we change it? What's the strategy for the next shot, for example? And I think in regards to controlling emotions, it's just about letting the shot go. And I think a lot of players don't let the shots go, meaning, they'll think about what they did wrong, and then they get upset, or they'll, figure out a way to, change their emotions or that type of thing. So what I tell all my players is like, okay, that's why I always ask them, what's good about it? How can we change it? And what's the strategy for the next shot? That kind of thing. And that's the process I go through with all my players in regards to the emotion side of it, because that's what they say. They're like, well, I was upset because I hit, I missed the putt. I'm like, well, what was good about it? And maybe the distance was really good. Maybe we just didn't read the putt, well enough, for example. That's the kind of stuff that I go through with all my players.
Yeah, and that's a great point. That's important because, if you bring, somebody like Tiger Woods into the picture, I remember very early on in his career, he certainly could hit the ball a pretty good long way, but he was not the most accurate off the tee. But one thing that he developed very early on was a very good recovery of his game. In other words, he was able to, I remember him hitting it out to the right on the Buick Open on hole. I don't remember what hole it was now, but he hit it into the rough. And, he ended up carving a 6-iron and landing it, about 10 feet left of the pin. And people were, flabbergasted that, I'm talking a big, cut. And he was very in control of his emotions. And it almost seemed effortless, even though he had to give it a pretty good whack. So I think for players in that zone, I think you have to really learn to clear your mind and just say, oh, here's the task at hand, and here's what I've got to do, and I've just got to get it done, and not really focus on, because once the shot's done, there's nothing you can do. You can't change it. You can't take it back. It's done. So then you have to move forward. So to sort of sum this thing up, if we want to be in the zone, if we want to get ourselves in the zone, what would be your formula of success for a player to be able to do that, to have that feeling of being in the zone?
Wow, that's a good one. First of all, let's go back to that example you just did with Tiger. Tiger's practiced that shot a lot. People may not realize that, but he's put himself in that situation and carted the ball around, a driving range post or a flag or something. So I think, first of all, you need to go out and put yourself in situations that you can sort of get yourself, that you can understand you can recover from. So it's not as big of a deal sometimes as you think it might be, because there's a way out, and you can still get, a pretty good round going, even though, you're not hitting it as good as you'd like to. And I think, to me, those are probably some of my favorite rounds, the ones where I scored well, but I didn't hit it very well, because I knew I could recover. I think if you can put yourself in those situations, I think it'll give you a better chance to do that. And then I said, secondly, you have to get your mind right before you play. And, get on the range and get yourself warmed up, and then, put yourself in the thought process of, okay, I'm going to go out and tackle this golf course and have a strategy as to how you're going to do that first. And I think if you have that strategy in place, it's going to give you something that you can do as you go around, shot by shot by shot. Now you've got a plan in place, and I think it takes all the outside stuff away from you and gives you the ability to play better and sort of keep you in, quote unquote, sort of a zone. It's I think, if you haven't been in it, it's something that, from the outside in, it's kind of hard to say, well, no, you just have to do ABC and you're in the zone. I think it's something that you have to, get yourself into and have played pretty well at times. But I think it's all in the thought process of how you prepare yourself, and then, how you look at how you're going to play. And I think, what Sue said before, hey, what's the purpose of the round today? So I think if you can put yourself in a frame of mind before you start, I think that's a good, jump start to getting yourself into a better zone to play.
Great way to wrap that question up. There's so many things really that we can do as somebody who's playing at whatever level, to allow ourselves to get into that high level of confidence and feel like we're in the zone. Obviously, it may not seem the same as what we're seeing the professionals do, and we're not playing at the Masters or at the U.S. Open or the Open Championship, but we're still, to us, we want to do well. Maybe it's our club championship, maybe it's another important event, a corporate event that we're part of, and that we want to be able to score and be successful in. And we have to be able to learn to block out, all of the outside distractions. And so it may not be, quote unquote, that we're officially in the zone, but it may be our zone. It may be our level of calmness and peace and comfort. And when we're out there, we're going to give it the best approach that we can do, and we're going to feel relaxed and in control, especially of our emotions. And that doesn't mean you're not going to get upset, over a shot here or a shot there or even a bad hole. It just means that we're going to reduce the level of stress and the level of anxiety and get ourselves into a comfortable zone where we can manage ourselves with a relatively high success rate. And I think for the average golfer, I think that's really what it means to be in the zone for them. What are your final thoughts, Pete, and then, Sue, and then Pete?
Yeah, I think it's like you just said. I think it's the important thing is like, okay, what's your objective today? What's the purpose? And help them go through that process of what their purpose is. And I think that too many golfers have, what I want to say, high expectations of the rounds. And I think they think it's supposed to be perfect, or it's supposed to be, yada, yada, or whatever it may be. And I think that's where people struggle. They think it's like, okay, I'm just going to go out and shoot a 72 today, for example, on a par 72. And most of the time it doesn't happen. But I think that you just have to, teach your players, how to respond to the not so good shots, and teach them how to respond to the good shots too, because I think that's what they want to. You want to, when somebody hits a good shot, I teach my players to anchor that feeling. What's that? What does it feel like to hit a good shot and have success at the end of the shot? And that's what I teach my players all the time. Like, it depends on what you're thinking about when you're on the golf course, and I think that's one of the struggles a lot of people have when they're on the golf course is they have high expectations, and as we all know that the game is 60-40. It's full swing 60%, 40%, or I should say 60% short game and 40% full swing, and most people don't understand that, and I think that's where people struggle. They just don't understand the percentages of where could you score the best shots. And it's usually, 60% is what? Work on your short game, work on your putting, work on your chipping, work on your pitching, that type of thing. And that's what I do with a lot of my players is like just try to educate them about what the score is actually about, and the percentages of what do you think the full swing is in regards to the scoring in on a scorecard? It's 40%, whereas 60% is short game. And most people, what do? They work mostly on their full swing, and they don't practice much with their short game. And that's where I teach them a lot of that. I just educate them about, it's a 60-40 game.
Yep, that's right on the mark. You've got to be able to, in order to be a better player, you've got to work on the things, not only that give you the biggest struggle or difficulty in your own game, but you also have to isolate where, here's the thing, I think as teach professionals, I think we understand this inherently through our training and through our years of experience, but really you're trying to learn to become a better player. You're not going out there to just be a range rat. I mean, it's great to get out in the range and hit golf balls, but you're trying to become a player. In order to do that, you have to put all of those components together that we talked about here tonight, and you have to be able to find the right balance. And as I said earlier on, once you understand the why you're there, why you're playing, what level of play do you want, then you can sort of piece things together that are right for you, and that's something that your golf professional can help you with. Pete, any final thoughts on? And we don't have to stick with entering the zone, but anything that we talked about tonight. Any final thoughts as we get ready to wrap up?
I think more than anything else, it's the negative aspects of being on the golf course, those types of thought processes that keep people from playing their best. You've heard it as well as I have. They're standing on the last hole, and they said, if I 3-putt this, I have to buy lunch for the 4th Saturday in a row. So you may as well just pick it up and buy lunch because you're going to 3-putt anyway with that thought process. So,
right.
So, you sort of got to change, your overall attitude, what you're trying to do, and just try to keep it more positive and, laugh at yourself a little bit. I know I played around with one of my good buddies last Friday and absolutely topped the 3-wood off the tee. It went about 25 yards, and I laughed so hard. And he looked at me and says, "I thought you'd be mad." I said, "No, that was one of the funniest things I think I've done in a long time." That was hilarious.
Right.
It's totally had a totally different thought process to what I was trying to do, and that didn't work. So, but I think the more positive you are, I did make par, by the way, on that hole, so I'll just let everybody know that. So you can make pars from bad shots.
Right.
But, you just have to keep yourself as positive as you can. And try to look at what the outcomes are, and the more that you can to put yourself in a better frame of mind before you start and while you're playing, it's just going to make it easier for you to play golf, and you're going to have a heck of a lot more fun as well.
I couldn't agree more. And I don't feel bad, Pete. I've done something similar myself, from time to time.
Oh, it was funny. I laughed so hard.
Unfortunately, I remember years ago on the panel we had, and I'm not going to name names, but we had a young pro that came on and was fairly new to the business, and he was, real excited and, still played a lot of golf and sort of getting new into the business. And I said, here's what's going to happen. I said, the more successful of a teacher you become, the less golf you're going to actually play yourself, because I said you're not going to have time. You're going to be so busy on the lesson tee And I said, your game is going to end up going south. Well, theirs is, getting better, hopefully. And he didn't understand that. Well, some years later, we met up, I think it was at the PGA show, and he said, you were exactly right. He said, the busier I've gotten, he said, I hardly have time for my own game. And he said, it's starting to suffer a little bit. And he said, I'm making a point now of going back out and working on my own game as well. But, you have to work on things. And this is really to sum up from my end about tonight's discussion. Can you do, talking about burning out, can you do things too much? Sometimes, yes. But I think you have to, practice with purpose. You have to get out there and play as much as you can that you can honestly handle and enjoy playing. But you have to do it with a sense of humility as well. It takes time. It's a difficult game. There's a lot of new people that, since we just went through this pandemic a few years ago, a lot of new people that never played this game came out. And obviously, like everybody else, there's a little frustration that can go with it if you've never picked up a golf club. So you have to be patient, of course, when you're learning this game. But you also have to be willing to put in and invest the time. So once you've answered that why question that we talked about earlier on, and you decide what your level of commitment needs to be, you get a game plan and you work with your pro and you do what you need to do to get to those goals. But at the same time, you have that sense of humility along the way because you're going to duff a few shots off the tee. You're going to scull a few wedges across the green and you're going to putt every undulation on the green, even though it started out as a 5-foot putt, it's now rolled 20 feet past because it's down slope or what have you. So, those things are going to happen, and you just have to laugh them off and then get focused on, narrow that focus of attention on the next shot at hand because that's the one that counts now. So, all right, great discussion, guys. As always, I appreciate your thoughts and input, and I think we had an interesting one. I think it was a little bit different than what we normally do. So on that note, I'm going to give each of you a few moments. If there's, number one, let the folks know how they can reach out and get a hold of you. And then number two, if there's anything special that you want to plug, by all means, now's the time to do it. So, Pete, go with you, and then Sue to follow up.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. It's we say it all the time as well, but thanks for what you do because, having us on here, but behind the scenes, you're doing a lot of work, and we really appreciate, what you do to produce these shows. And Sue, great being with you this evening as well. They can reach me at PeteBuchananGolf.com. I'm moving. You can go out there now. It's a work in progress, but I'm working toward more of an online presence, and so they'll see some of the things we're trying to do. It's just easier to get out there. There's several ways you can contact me. So send me a note. Let's start a discussion and see how I can help your golf game.
Sounds good. And Sue, how about you?
Yeah, you can reach me at SueEagerGolf.com. And the Golf Last 6 Inches is on Amazon. And yeah, Pete, always enjoyed you, and it's always fun chatting with Ted.
Well, I appreciate both of you coming on and giving of your time, and we'll have, I believe, one more show together next month when you come back on. I'm not sure what days you guys are on, if you're on the same together or not, but we'll have one more opportunity to be able to help the audience before we knock off for the end of the season. But thank you guys for what you do and for spending time with me all these years on Coach's Corner.
Thanks, Ted.
Thanks, Ted.
All right. Have a great one, guys, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right. That was Sue Weger and Pete Buchanan joining me on the Coach's Corner panel. We're going to take a quick break, and when I come back, I'll be joined by this evening's very special guest, Taba Dale.
The following ad is sponsored by Golf Tips Magazine.
Are you tired of being short off the tee? And what about those 3 putts? Forget about it. It's time you got serious about your game. Golf Tips, the most in-depth magazine in the industry. For over 30 years, Golf Tips has delivered expert content such as the latest golf instruction from America's top pros, simple to follow practice and game improvement drills, fitness and mental game tips, equipment, training aids, accessory and apparel reviews, golf destinations and travel tips for every budget, and so much more. Don't miss a single issue. Go to golftipsmag.com and subscribe today.
All right, welcome back, and thank you for joining me this evening here on Golf Talk Live. We just finished wrapping up another great discussion on Coach's Corner, and now it's time for me to relax, sit back, and spend some time with my very special guest this evening. Let me tell you a little bit about her, and then I'll bring her on. Her name is Taba Dale. She actually joined me on Women of Golf along with Cindy Miller a little while back in the season, and we had a great time on there, and I invited her to come back on this program to spend a little bit more time to talk about a number of different things. But let me tell you a little bit about her first, and then we'll bring her on. She is the owner of Taba Inc. She's also a board member of the Golf Heritage Society, and also authored the book Terroir of Golf, a golf book for wine lovers. She took up golf fairly late in life and not having any exposure by family or friends or during her childhood, but realized that her goal to be a decent golfer was not materializing as much as she had hoped, despite being a decent tennis player for a decade. But she turned it around and found if she focused on the aspect of being in nature while playing golf, a whole new world opened up for her. So she began writing about golf and has never stopped, beginning with short stories and now entire books. As I mentioned, she became a board member of the Golf Heritage Society, the first woman, in fact, to join the board, and opened up another avenue when the editor of the Golf Heritage Society Journal, The Golf, published a couple of her stories, not just because of the joy of seeing her pieces published, but she experienced the exhilaration of connecting with so many like-minded golf enthusiasts. So very passionate about the game, so please welcome my very special guest, Taba Dale. Good evening, Taba. How are you?
Oh, my goodness, Ted. What an incredible intro. Thank you so much. It's really great to be back with you.
Well, thank you. And we get to spend a little bit more time this evening. I know we got a lot of things to cover, but we'll try to get through and get through and give you a chance to talk about a little bit of everything. So, but thank you for taking time out, and I appreciate you coming on the show tonight. So first off, let's focus on a little bit about the Golf Heritage Society. As I mentioned, you're a board member for the Golf Heritage Society and the first female really to join the board. So obviously that was a very good milestone to cover. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But you guys just actually wrapped up I'm going to call them GHS for short, just to simplify the process. But they actually... Yeah, I learned that when Dr. Bernanke would come on, I had to shorten it because we talk about it so much. But they just had their annual convention in Lexington, Kentucky, just a couple of weeks ago. So that just wrapped up. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I really love getting together with all these other passionate golf geeks. I don't know what else to call us, but, people who love the game, they love the history, they love the heritage, and they love to get together with each other. And I had a great time with so many people that I have been seeing now over and over. Last time we were in Indianapolis, and before that we were in Latrobe, home of Arnold Palmer. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like I have made friendships with these people, and I think that is what is that's like the best benefit of being a member of the Golf Heritage Society is the camaraderie. It's also what you learn from people. They're so knowledgeable. There's so many serious collectors and major historians. I'm a minor historian, if a historian at all. But I learn from these people. So that's the other big benefit is the learning. And I also just want to say to any women who might be listening and thinking about, could this be a society that I could be interested in? I think that the avenues for creativity for women are limitless in the world of golf. And we get so much encouragement from people in the Golf Heritage Society that I have to thank all those people because they lift me up.
That's a great point. And just to touch on that a little bit, I think for a lot of women particularly, and even I think for men it's been a little bit different because we've had more exposure for a longer period. And really the only exposure most women have seen is, of course, through the LPGA efforts and things like that, which is fantastic. So their sort of visual, if you will, is, oh, a tour player, well, that's not for me. But more and more women are realizing that there are so many business opportunities in golf, in the golf industry, and subsequently in sort of spin-off industries that sort of parallel or work with golf. And also being involved in an organization, as you are now with the Golf Heritage Society, learning about the history of the game, how it began, and what the opportunities there are as well. So I think that's an important thing to really mention as well, because you've started to see that firsthand, and obviously through Dr. Bernanke's efforts of trying to be more inclusive with the organization, that of course invited you to become a board member, and now you're able to pass that on by reaching out to other women and explaining to them some of the benefits and that to others, members of the society as well. So I think that is something that you've been able to sort of grapple on as well, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And as I might have mentioned a long time ago, I think I got noticed by Dr. Bernanke when he started reading some of my stories in the quarterly journal called The Golf. And I wanted to also say that is, for me, one of, if not the biggest benefit of being a member, because the magazine comes out quarterly and it's so chock full of fascinating stories about, some of them are historical, but I started writing about other lady members like Debbie Waitkus, who I think you know. I wanted her to be a member, so I gifted her a membership, but she's kept it up. And another lady who lives in the Phoenix area, Corey Brett, who's a writer and an editor. And, let me see who else. Jill Mann-Strite, who is an LPGA professional. And all these women, when I wrote their profiles, I think the membership was amazed. Goodness, we have all these people who are members of our society, and they all bring so much to the society. They bring a lot to the table, each one of them. Well said.
And I happen to know both of them very, very well. I've interviewed them many times on the show over the years, and actually both shows. And they are, and there's so many others that are in the golf profession who do so much to give back to not just the industry itself, but into their communities. And folks like Nancy Lopez, who of course is very well known for her play, but also gives back to her communities and has done so for years. So it's not just about playing the game; it's also about how can they use that gift that they've been given to make things better for everybody all the way around, and especially in the women's side of things. And so let me ask you, I see something kind of very interesting and exciting that at GHS, that you guys are going to be sending a travel team. So you're kind of a new phase, kind of exciting phase. They're going to be going to the PGA show in January down at Orange County Convention in Orlando. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I missed the last one because I know you're not going to feel sorry for me. I had to go to New Zealand and Australia. So the travel team went without me. But this year I'll get to be part of it when we're there in January. And, it just gives us an opportunity to walk around, see what's going on in the industry, meet with people. If they want to meet with us, we'll try and set up some meetings in advance. But another thing that Golf Heritage Society is learning about is sponsorship. And a lot of potential sponsors of the society would be at the PGA show. Our first significant sponsor is Mike Kaiser, the founder and developer of Bandon Dunes. And he got it, Ted. He just got it, what we're all about. And I just think there are other people like him who, when they know more about our society, they'd be overjoyed to become sponsors. So that's, we're going there to educate ourselves pretty much.
Yeah, and that's a great place to go. I met actually Dr. Bernanke last year. Of course, he's been on the show many times over the last several years, but we actually met face to face in Orlando last year at the PGA show, and I'm sure I'll see him again this year. But speaking of which, then after the PGA show, GHS is also going to be participating in another show out in Phoenix, January 27th to February 1st. Tell us about what's happening there.
So, this is the GCSAA show, Golf Course Superintendents Association of America. I think I got that right.
You got it right.
It was sort of my idea to take up an offer that they had granted us through another member named Mel Lucas, who's been in the golf industry for decades, very active in Europe before COVID, member of both Golf Heritage Society and GCSSA, and he said, well, you know, Golf Heritage Society has been offered a free table. That was it, a free table. And I thought, wow, why don't we take advantage of that? So not only was it a table, it was a whole booth, and we got to participate in the GCSAA show in San Diego, and it was an absolute blast. And we made so many great connections. The USGA is there, the American Society of Golf Course Architects is there. There are all these people, and I said to, the powers that be, the Bernakis, I mean, these are our people. This is our audience. Mm-hmm. We need to go be where they are. And we did. Right. And they loved having us, and now we're invited back. So that's going to be really fun. I can't say it's my hometown because I live in Scottsdale, but right. I'll come back from the PGA show in time to be a part of that. I can be part of that travel team.
Perfect. Speaking of travel, you did some travel in the summer of 2023. In fact, you just got back just a little over a month ago with your partner, Kevin McGrath. You guys spent some time, obviously, in Ireland. Tell us about that.
Well, we do live in Ireland. I get to spend my summers in Ireland thanks to Kevin, who was born in Dublin, he's single-digit golfer since his college days. He joined Lahinch over 40 years ago and built a house down there in County Clare on the west coast. We're right on the water's edge. Look to my left, I see the dunes of Lahinch. Look to my right, I see this really cool castle ruin and then the Atlantic beyond it. That's where I get to spend my summers, except that we move around a lot. This summer, we were in Scotland twice. We had a big group in July, the group called For the Ladies, and we based ourselves right in St. Andrews. We stayed at Russex, right overlooking the 18th fairway of the old course. Doesn't get much better than that. And we did lots of really fun things. We got to have a VIP tour of the R&A World Golf Museum. We had dinner with the curators upstairs, a private dinner in the Niblick Brasserie. We had private whiskey tours and tastings at King's Barnes, played the course earlier that day. And then we had an amazing presentation by a VIP guest named Beverly Bell, who's also a member of the Golf Heritage Society. Beverly is the author of a book called The Murder of Marion Miley, and she did her presentation on our final private dinner in St. Andrews for the ladies group. So it was chock full of great stuff, but the best thing I would say is that all the ladies got to play the old course. And what golf pilgrim doesn't want to go to the home of golf and play the old course? And they all got to do it, so they were happy.
Yeah, and it's nice, too, because you obviously had a lot of other things. It wasn't all just about golf. There were other things that were thrown in there that they were able to experience as well, which makes it fun. So it's more like a like you said, a VIP trip and tour of a lot of very interesting things in the St. Andrews area. Now, you had a second group as well. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Well, we got to come back to St. Andrews, and this time we stayed at the Old Course Hotel. This was a 5-star trip, top to bottom. Even the weather was 5-star. So this was our couple's dream trip, and we all just had the greatest time. And as you were saying, even with the group in July, it's not just about golf. It's a cultural experience just to be in the town of St. Andrews, which of course is where you have St. Andrews University, and St. Andrews was centuries ago the kind of the ecclesiastic center of Europe. The pilgrims of those days were religious pilgrims. So we also did a bunch of different things with the Dream Couples trip, but I can tell you this, it involved a lot of haute cuisine and a lot of wine.
Well, that's a great way to cap off a trip, is to have that throughout. And you know what? No trip would be complete without some wine. So I think that's fantastic. But
you're my kind of guy, Ted.
It's interesting though. Just hearing about that, and we're going to skip into what you've got planned for 2024 in a second. But it's interesting because when you're planning, this type of excursion. I mean, obviously, especially if you're coming from the United States to go over to St. Andrews, to that area, it costs money. So you want to be able to have something to, be entertaining, be culturally informative, so that you understand. So when you're over there, whether it's a week or whatever the case is, that you kind of feel when you come home that you were living there for the week and you've actually experienced the culture, the local flair, and so forth. But you've also had an experience, because obviously, it's not a new resort. It's not something that's just been built last week. There's a lot of history there as well, and especially for people that play golf, that whether you're new or you've been a veteran of the game, there is no other experience like going to St. Andrews. So it's really interesting, some of the things that you had planned, correct?
Absolutely. And I also recommended to people, we put out a big document in advance. First of all, our travel tips to Scotland, and we go into what the currency is and what kind of adapter you need. And in fact, one of the gifts we gave everybody was our favorite 3-prong adapter. But then I suggested people at least go visit the grave of Old Tom Morris and Young Tom Morris at the opposite end of town, and a lot of them did, and some of them even took a walking tour of St. Andrews, which I just thought was fabulous. I recommended other books to them to try to get a little more familiar with the culture of the town, particularly in the late 19th century. One of the good books is Tommy's Honor by Kevin Cook. And you really get a feeling for what it was like to live in the time of Old Tom Morris, and then when Young Tom was born, what it was, what their whole history was like, moving to Prestwick, where Old Tom laid out the original 12 holes that became the course for the first Open Championship in 1860. And so I think that these ladies in particular, I think, they started to connect the dots for themselves and realize, oh, this is where this game comes from. This is what we don't get this kind of, we don't learn this history or this heritage in America, but you can't go to Scotland and not, especially if you're staying in the town of St. Andrews. I mean, you're immersed in the whole town and the culture, and it's got a great vibe. It's charming. It's just beautiful to walk around. All the flowering baskets, just the people of St. Andrews, and they have so much pride in the town as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
right.
It's my favorite town. It's a big little town. It's my favorite.
Well, and it's amazing too. In addition to obviously 5-star overall experience. You had 5-star weather, which is unheard of in that neck of the woods. You usually aren't as fortunate, and that's not to say it's bad, but it's certainly much different than what we often are used to over here. So as I mentioned, now you're gearing up, and I was reading through some of the notes earlier, and you guys are off to a boom for 2024, and it's not even here yet. What's happening in 2024 as far as your travel business is going? You've got a lot of things happening up. So lay it out for us,
We're almost overwhelmed.
Taba.
I mean, it's I think because of COVID, the COVID pandemic was good for golf in a way. I mean, golf really boomed during those years, and there's kind of no let up. But I feel that people who could not travel, now that they can, there's all this pent-up demand, and boy, are they traveling. So we're very privileged to be able to curate a lot of trips for other people. We almost never travel with these clients. There's too many of them. But we do have one really cool tour that we created several years ago called the Golf and Music Tour. And this one in 2024, it's been sold out for a couple of months already. But we travel. We have 3 Irish musicians who travel with us, and they play golf during the day and music at night. And everybody has such a blast. This year we're going up to the north. We're going to play Portrush, which is going to host the Open Championship again in 2025, and Port Stewart, which is really an amazing golf course, and Royal County Down, of course. I don't know. It's always top 10 in the world. The new golf magazine just came out with the new ranking, and I don't know where it is, but it's always top 10. And then we come back down to the Dublin area, and that's a great itinerary that anybody could do in 1 week's time. But we have some other people who are coming over, and they want to do some more sightseeing, and I always like to recommend things like in Belfast, there's this amazing museum called the Titanic Experience, and it is remarkable. I could just say anybody coming over, if you could consider carving out a half a day to go to Belfast and have that experience. Also up in that direction is a place called Newgrange, which is older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge. It's a monumental portal tomb, and in America, we've never heard of this. The people overseas, everybody's heard of, say, the Grand Canyon. Everybody. But we don't. We have never heard of Newgrange, and that's another that could be an all-day experience. If you like history and learning about history, which I do.
And that's what makes the trips, just reading some of the trips that you've already done and currently this year and what you're planning for next year. Again, it makes them very interesting because, again, it's not, you're obviously playing golf while you're there. That's, one of the purposes there, but you've also packed it in with some other things, some music and other activities as well, which makes it very interesting because, even the most fervent golfer out there needs to have a break from the golf course, especially if they played a bad round. They want to do whatever they can to get away from the golf course for a little while. So, it's nice to, to be able to do that. So, so great. It sounds like you've got a lot of things, that are happening, and as you mentioned, you're already you've got people that are booking for 2025. So you're working 2 years out, which is a testament to what you and Kevin are doing together and putting these very interesting and fascinating trips together. So kudos to both of you for doing that.
Well, we were going to roll out. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, before COVID hit, we were going to roll out our golf and wine tour to France. And we put it all together. It was 100% all mapped out, where we'd stay, wineries, Versailles, and now we're going to resurrect that. And another trip that we have cooking is a trip to Italy. So we would experience golf and wine and cuisine and culture. So it would be a little less golf and a lot more of the wine, more wine tasting. So that there's and you know, we're just finding so many people do share those dual passions.
I couldn't agree more. And you know, again, that adds to the fun and the flavor of any trip is to have, you know, all of these other things sort of packed into, you know, there's a little something for everybody. Obviously, you know, there's a lot of golf being played too, but there's many other things and opportunities to be able to explore the area and learn a little bit of history of somewhere other than your own home. So which brings me to our last topic that we're going to talk about, and there's a lot of things to cover here, of course, but is your new book, and that is Terroir of Golf, which is a golf book for wine lovers, and how appropriate to have that. So let's talk about first how you came up with this name.
Well, I'm so glad you asked, because it was almost just a magical thing. Kevin and I were playing golf. We were on a course called the Macri on Isla, and Isla is a little island in the Hebrides, and it's far better known for whiskey. Whiskeys like Lafroig, Bowmore. I think that you just can't go there and not do whiskey tasting. So this is a course that was laid out in the late 1890s, and it is so pure, so authentic, links golf. And we're out, the day we were there, we're just pretty much the only two people on the course. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I had my aha moment. Terroir of Golf just came to me, that phrase, just like that. And I think a little while later, the subtitle came along. But I realized that as with grapes, so it is with golf. Everything begins with ground. And as it is with a glass of wine that you hold in your hand or a golf course that you play, the end result is a living work of art. So that was the whole thing. I got that whole thing. It was like a divine download.
And the first part of it's really a travel log you mentioned here, where you obviously visit a lot of different clubs and courses all over Scotland, including the Macri, which you mentioned in that. So, you know, again, as you're traveling along, you're really, these thoughts are coming to your head, and you're saying, okay, I can put this together in a book, and here's what, you know, some of the things I'm going to lay out. And you actually, which was really interesting because you sent me an image of it. One of the images that you sent was the claret jug. Talk a little bit about that, because that's a very kind of an interesting story.
Oh, golly. Well, so many people have written about the claret jug, and of course the trophy that came before it, the belt, the challenge belt. So you can't really talk about the jug unless you at least mention the belt, because everybody else does. When the Open Championship was first created in 1860, the trophy was this red Moroccan leather belt with this big silver buckle, and the winner got to have that belt for 1 year. And it was very much coveted by any winner. And when it was won by young Tom, three years in a row, 1868, 69, 70, young Tom got to keep the belt in perpetuity. Well, now, we have no trophy. So, in fact, when they held the Open Championship in 1871, well, they didn't hold it because they didn't have a trophy, which is kind of weird. And the three clubs, Prestwick, Muirfield, and the Royal and Ancient of St. Andrews, all pitched in 10 pounds to commission a new trophy. And the trophy they commissioned was the Sterling Claret jug. So that became the trophy ever since then. But I wrote, my story is why a jug and what is claret? And I go all the way back to when the Romans planted the vines in France to tell that story. So I get you all to strap on your seatbelts and time travel with me, and I can assure you nobody has written about the claret jug in such a way.
I can imagine. You know, and that's interesting because, again, it goes back to the history of that, which most people, unless they're real golf enthusiasts, really don't know the history and how it led up to, you know, to more modern day times, particularly. So they don't know the story, and it's great that this is a chapter that you've put in the book as well, talking about this iconic trophy, because it is, for people that understand the Open Championship and understand the significance, of the claret jug. This gives them a little bit of a backstory, and actually, I'm sure, a very extensive backstory to it, which is important. If you're going to, really become a golf enthusiast, you need to understand the history of the game and some of the many things. And this is obviously a very famous one that you've obviously covered
well,
very well in your book.
Hopefully I make it entertaining. It isn't meant to be a textbook, but I do talk about how Eleanor of Aquitaine married Henry II of England, and when she married Henry and came to England, she brought with her more wine. She brought more wine into England than comes into England today, in these days, in our time. And it was just, she didn't just bring wine. I mean, she brought perfume and spices, and she brought so much more of her culture, being French, and then the whole idea of the claret, the wine. Claret became synonymous just about for a Bordeaux red, and it got to be called claret because my French pronunciation isn't that great, but it'd probably be more like claret, and the British and everybody else, including me, find that a hard word to pronounce, so it became claret. And claret, at the time, the wine was, claret is more like clear, and the wine was more clear. It wasn't so dark and robust as it is now, but over decades and over hundreds of years, they figured out that wine actually ages very well if it's left in the barrel, and it darkens, and it's, the whole taste changes, but it's still called claret because it's easy, and it's, as I said, it's really the commonplace word for a Bordeaux red.
Very interesting. And you also, I noticed too, there's a chapter in here which I found, because obviously I know all of the people that you're talking about in this particular chapter, but you cover many of the golf professionals who actually have their own wine labels. And I'll just name a few. Obviously notables: Ernie Els, Nick Faldo, David Frost, Retief Goosen, obviously Mr. Jack Nicklaus, Greg Norman, the late Arnold Palmer, and of course Gary Player, who just celebrated her birthday. And then a couple of other ladies that add out is Annika Sorenstam and Jan Stevenson. So there's a dozen of them here that you talk about. Maybe you could talk about a couple of them that really stood out to you when you were doing your research and sort of getting the information together. Who were some of the real notables of this group that really stood out with their labels?
Well, you named almost all of them, and one person, I'm not sure, because you rattled them off so fast, I'm not sure if you mentioned Retief Goosen, and he
yes,
has
I did,
his own wine
and Christy
label.
Kerr.
The Goose. Oh, and Christy Kerr, yes. She actually lives not too far from me in Scottsdale. So Retief Goosen, I don't know if many people know this. In fact, I believe when he was inducted into the World Golf Hall of Fame, he even talked about it himself. When he was a teenager, maybe 14, 15 years old, he took a direct hit. He was struck by lightning, and he was playing with another young guy, and when he was hit and he just, fell to the ground unconscious, literally all his clothes burned off his body, his shoes disintegrated, and his watch melted into his arm. And he did recover. Not only did he recover, he went on to win 2 U.S. Opens, but you might say maybe he's sort of quiet. It could be because from having that experience, I think, to me it sounds like he came back from the dead. He had probably had a near death experience. I just can't imagine being struck by lightning and surviving. Well, they all have interesting stories. David Frost, he's fourth generation vintner. He grew up, working in the vineyards and saving money up to buy his first set of clubs by working in the vineyards.
I know I've seen David's many posts throughout social media, obviously promoting his label and that. So I'm not really familiar specifically with the actual wines, but I know I've seen him many times. But obviously some I think again they're all, even though they're all professional golfers, they're also entrepreneurs and they like to get involved in other aspects of business and things like that. Who else sort of stands out of the crowd that you really
Luke Donald.
Really enjoy?
Luke Donald. Right. I think you might have skipped over Luke Donald.
I did.
So
yeah,
Luke
I did
Donald,
by mistake.
He's super, super, super serious wine connoisseur, and he is. I mean, he really he's under the hood. He's sourcing grapes and just somebody who's very intimately involved in the creation of his wines, as is Christy Kerr. She and her winemakers both have been females, as a matter of fact. I mean, she gets down in the dirt, into the vineyards. And Christy actually also has her level 1 sommelier certification. It would be kind of hard for her to do much more because she is not working in that industry, and you almost have to work as a sommelier. But back to Luke Donald for a second. I had to update everybody's stories because Terroir of Golf might not be coming out until spring of 2024. But so when I first wrote Luke's story, he hadn't been named a captain of the European Ryder Cup team. Of course, now he's the victorious captain of the Ryder Cup team. So little by little by little, I have to keep updating things, like the Adair Manor story. In the last chapter of the book is golf clubs around the world with a strong wine culture. And I often say this book is like a treasure trove of stories and unexpected discoveries, and I don't think many people would think of Adair Manor as a place that would be, a golf club, golf resort with a strong wine culture. But it is amazing. Their wine cave, and they also are going to be hosting the Ryder Cup in 2027. So that's a segue from Luke Donald to Adair and the Ryder Cup.
And it's interesting because again, there are more and more players, as you point out in your book. And obviously, there's been a lot of golf clubs, and as this game has continued to expand, obviously for many, many years, and it still is on some level, the U.S., of course, is the biggest market. But as golf has become more a global sport now, and more courses coming up, and obviously competing for the attention of the golfing enthusiasts, and now, of course, the wine enthusiasts, they're ramping up and recognizing that, hey, we want to be able to offer not only high-level experience on the golf course, but off the golf course. And we recognize that a lot of people want to, taste and experience wines from literally all over the world, not just, again, here in the United States. So, you're seeing more and more of that, especially in the Asian market, as you point out, in South Korea and other markets as well. It's just becoming, really world class in so many ways. So it's interesting that you touch on that. So you really covered a lot of things in this book, not just about the wine per se, but a lot of areas, and you sort of wrapped it up into not just the areas that you talk about, but you talk about some of the contributors to wine from the golfing world, and then obviously some of the locations and clubs and so forth from around the world as well. So you really covered a wide range of things in your book.
Thank you so much.
Which is obviously the intent, but it's very, very interesting. So I think somebody, as you point out in the sort of subtitle, a golf book for wine lovers, I think they're going to certainly thoroughly enjoy that as well. And of course the many different images that you put in the book, as well as some great writing. So,
thank you. Well, Kevin, there's 66 million golfers in the world. I have to think that there's a few more wine drinkers. And you put them all together, it's a pretty big audience.
It is a very big audience, exactly. So the new Terroir of Golf book will be, as you put it, an elevated golf or elevated book experience. So, and that's you said going to be in print in spring of 2024. How can people learn and get their hot little hands on that? I think you've sold out quite a bit. In fact, I think you said you only had 2 hard copy versions left. Is that correct?
Well, we had a very small print run, and to kind of test the market, and we found there's a great appetite for this book and its content, and even some head golf professionals that we talked to and directors of golf of private clubs that have member guest events, both for men and women. They were, gosh, we'd love to have something like this as a gift for our member guest. When can we get it? Mm-hmm. So we can't rush this too much, but in fact, the new book designer is Chick Harper, who he I own several books by Chick, and I never thought in my wildest dreams that I could ever have him be my book designer, but he's my book designer for this new, I just love that word, elevated, elevated golf reading experience. And the printer is a real top-end company in Glasgow, McAllister Litho Glasgow. And in my own library, I own several books that they have printed. I just got one called from the Royal Liverpool Golf Club called the Hoylake Celebration, and these books are so exquisite. So I am now going to have one of those exquisite books. That's the new Terroir. That's what I'm planning it. That's what I'm planning for it.
Well, that's fantastic. And like I said, it's really a very interesting book. Obviously, I haven't read it yet, but it is a very interesting book, and has a lot of information about some of the history of the game a little bit. Obviously, with reference to the claret jug, and obviously about some of the areas around the world that you can find some great wine for those that are traveling and want to experience that. And then obviously it's got so many other things as well. So I think it's going to be a great read for those, and I can understand why people are already lining up. So I'm sure you're going to have to print off a few more in 2024. But so for those that want to get updates about the book, they can visit your author site, which is clairehousepublishing.com, or they can contact you directly at Dale at gmail.com, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. And on the website, on the Clair House Publishing website, clairehousepublishing.com, right on the home page, there's a button. It'll show you that the Terroir Golf book, the first one, is sold out. And then there's a button you can click on. It says Upcoming New Terroir Edition.
Yep.
And if you just click on that button, it'll take you to a page where you can subscribe or get on a mailing list so that you'll get updates, and when it's available, you'll be the first to know.
Perfect. So go to clearhousepublishing.com, and you can click on for the updated version. It takes you to a new page within their website, giving you a little bit more look and feel of the book, and then obviously some of the new content. And there is, right, as you said, right near the bottom, if you want to get updates, you can just fill out your information, your email address, and subscribe, and you'll get that information as it becomes available. But Taba, thank you very much for coming on tonight. I've enjoyed it, and I appreciate all that you do. And I hope you come back and visit me on the show again.
Oh, my goodness. Are you kidding? I would love to. I'm so honored that you've had me now again, and we get to talk about one of my other passions, which is writing. So I'm very honored. I feel very honored, Ted. Thank you so much.
So I for those also that are interested for those few spots that are going to be left for your travel, can they reach you at the same email, or do you have some other way that you prefer for them to reach out if they're interested in contacting you?
Well, sure. Anybody who wants to contact me at tabadale@gmail, I welcome you to do that. I have another site you can visit called Scottsdale Collection, scottsdalecollection.com. So the Scottsdale site has lots of testimonials. It has a lot of trips that we've done in the past to give people a feeling for what we have done before. It does have the whole itinerary of the new Golf and Music Tour for 2024, but it does tell you it is sold out. But people just keep, there are a lot of people who've done this trip before, and they just keep coming back because it is so much fun. The combination of the golf and the music, and that's Ireland. That's what Ireland is all about. And throw in a little Guinness, you've really got and then some castles and some gardens and some standing stones and all the other things that I'm interested in. But so we're sure to do another one, and we have to do this one first. We don't want to get people's hopes up too far in advance, but this one is going to be a lot of fun. And we know it. It's a tried and true. We got a track record doing this golf and music thing. It's really something really special. So ScottsdaleCollection.com, and you'll find that's a whole other world. And there's much more about golf and golf architecture and a little bit of my writing too.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you very much for joining me this evening to talk about your book and obviously talk about the many things that you're doing on the travel side of thing, and also for all of the great work helping to expand the Golf Heritage Society as well as one of their members. So keep up the great work, and you're welcome to come back and join me on any of the programs, Golf Talk Live, and obviously the Women of Golf.
I just so appreciate what you do. You're an amazing man, Ted. Thank you again for having me. I really feel so privileged.
It's my pleasure. And have fun in 2024, and much continued success with the book. And
you might
we'll
come
talk
and
to you
join
again
us.
Real soon.
We might have you over in Ireland or Scotland or France or Portugal or Spain or any of the other places we're going.
That would be fantastic. Thank you again, and have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Ted. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, that was Taba Dale, my very special guest. And again, you can check out her new book at the clearhousepublishing.com website. All of the information there talks about what's in the book, but you can also, the current book obviously is sold out, but there's a new edition that's going to be coming out for next year. Again, you can click on that link, just go to the home page, and there's a link to scroll down about halfway, and it says upcoming new Terroir edition. You just click on that. It'll take you to the new page, and you can fill it out if you're interested in getting on that waiting list and get updates. And then also, if you're interested in the travel side of things, you can visit her other website, scottsdalecollection.com, and you'll see all kinds of information, upcoming trips, and obviously a way to contact her there as well. And if you're wanting more information about the book, you can also reach out to her at Taba Dale, at TABADALE at gmail.com. I want to thank all of my guests this evening, Taba, of course, and also I want to thank the gang on the Coach's Corner segment, Pete Buchanan and Sue Weger, for joining me earlier on this evening. Always a great discussion there with another great panel discussion and another insightful interview guest. I hope you'll join me. God bless everybody and have a great weekend.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this week's broadcast of Golf Talk Live. We'd like to thank this week's Coach's Corner panel, and a special thank you to tonight's guest. Remember to join Ted every Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. Central on Golf Talk Live. And be sure to follow Ted on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're interested in being a guest on Golf Talk Live, send Ted an email at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. This has been a production of the iGolf Sports Network.